Hey, welcome into the Stinkin Truth podcast alongside Mike Evans. I am Mark Schlereth. The draft is wrapped up. So much news involved in the NFL draft. Mike, how are you, buddy?
Man, it was a roller coaster, wasn't it? And let's face it. Was there any better reality TV on this weekend than watching the Shedeur Sanders story?
No, it was incredible. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's arguable. It's the greatest slide in NFL draft history, right?
Yep.
A guy that was universally considered a first-round pick. And if you aggregate all the mock drafts and put them all together, he was somewhere around 11 to 13. Yep. I think 93% of all mock drafts had him going in the first round. And let's face it, man, and these are not just some also-rans or guys like you and me that aren't really following the NFL draft. We just know it well enough to talk a little bit about it and to talk about the first rounders. These are guys who do this for a living. The Mel Kipers of the world, the Todd McShays of the world, on and on, Joel Klatt, this, that, and the other. Guys that have, are very reputable, who really dig into this stuff, who really know the draft, who have years and years and years of coverage and have nailed it time and time again, all had Shador Sanders being rated. Mel Kiper had him as the first overall quarterback and then eventually moved him down to number 2. But everybody had him right there. And for him to go from a potential first rounder to the 5th round overall, number 144 taken and the 6th quarterback taken in the draft, absolutely epic slide.
So the question's why?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, Mike. I mean, if we're just looking on the surface, because I've heard a lot of people talk about collusion, and we know that this is not just a quarterback-driven league, but it's a quarterback-deprived league. Now, the thing is, when I hear people say, well, 32 teams passed on him, 4 different times before he got drafted in the first round, not all 32 teams are looking for a quarterback. So I think that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. Then, 2, if you have generational talent, right, teams will overlook some of the intangible things or some of the character things that they don't care for. This goes all the way back to the start of football season last year at CU, when the reports coming out of CU were, we're going to dictate where he goes in the draft. Hey, there's 6 or 7 teams that he'll get drafted for. If you take him and you're not one of our teams, hey, c'est la vie, we're not signing with you. This bravado, this stuff that was coming out of CU, from Dion, from Shedeur, like none of that ever sits well with NFL types, okay? But if you have generational talent, then it doesn't matter that you say that stuff because you're still going to get taken, right? Hey, John Elway, don't draft me, Baltimore. I don't want to go there. Hey, like Eli Manning, don't draft me, San Diego. I'm not going to play there. San Diego drafts Eli. Baltimore drafts John. Draft day trades were consummated. John becomes a Denver Bronco. Eli becomes a New York Giant. So we know that if you have generational type talent, doesn't matter that you said that stuff before the draft. But Shedeur doesn't. Frankly, Shedeur is incredibly accurate, throws a nice ball, does not have elite-level athleticism, does not have elite-level arm talent, okay? But you could still be a first-rounder because of your ability to anticipate, your ability to throw guys open, your accuracy that you possess. But you couple that with what has reported to be bad meetings with different teams, like that's the part that we don't have until we get into the draft process, right? Like all the stuff that we have before the draft, going in and leading into the combine, is all the film stuff we see, all the things, the big plays, the throws and all that stuff. But after this combine process, a lot of stuff is the individual meetings, and you better shine in those like meetings. You better shine in that aspect of the draft process, especially if you play quarterback. And we heard terms like arrogant. We heard terms like elitist. We heard terms like, poor meeting, like just
unprepared.
Overall. Yeah, unprepared, just like all those things that we heard. And I'm sure those things had more to do with him dropping in this draft than anything else that we could throw out there.
I thought the slide was explained in I think it was pretty simple, honestly. I think once the quarterback needy teams in the NFL decided that he was not worth a first round pick, then he was screwed. And he was going to drop, because here's why. Once you get past the first round, if you're a quarterback taken after that, then you walk into that and you're put in that developmental backup type of category. Well, the one thing NFL teams don't want is their developmental quarterback or their backup quarterback to be a distraction. They don't want the big tent to be set up. They don't want the circus atmosphere. I kind of compare what I saw this weekend with Shedeur Sanders to Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow easily could have been a backup quarterback or a third string quarterback on somebody's team for a long, long time, right? But teams just looked at it and said, for that role, it's not worth the attention. It's not worth the drama. It's not worth all the aggravation that could come with it. So I think teams, the reason you saw a lot of these other quarterbacks go ahead of Shedeur, it's not because they're a better prospect than Shedeur. It was just that they're going to create less drama than a guy like Shedeur would bring. So that's why I think ultimately he lasted all the way to the fifth round. And honestly, Stink, the only reason I think he even got drafted was because Cleveland's owner came in and said, hey, I see the potential here for some headlines, some attention, some buzz. And I think he ordered the Browns to move up and draft him.
Yeah, if you look at the video of Stefanski and Barry, the head coach and GM, like, it was one of those things where, like, they had to come up. It felt like they had to come up with a reason. Like, they weren't really looking to draft him, and then they had to come up with a reason. Like, the owner comes in and goes, "This is who we're drafting." They're like, "Oh shoot, let's get our stories together, right?" And they're like, "Hey, upon further review, the talent was just such that we could not." We could not look at ourselves, in the mirror the next day if we bypass that level of talent, because it just sounded like a lot of, lawyer talk, like heretofore, consequently, as it were,
I felt like watching that video. I was almost like, please blink twice if you're being held against your will.
Right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So there was part of that. There was part of that aspect to them taking Shedeur. But with that said, Mike, let's face it. Like, you go into Cleveland, the competition level, we know Deshaun Watson is done, right? He's not going to play. He got another torn, Achilles. And then you got 40-year-old Joe Flacco, which I have a lot of respect for Joe, but he's 40. You got tiny little hands, Kenny Pickett.
Pray for him.
Pray for his tiny little hands. You got tiny little guy in Daniel Gabriel. Like,
that'd be Dylan Gabriel, but who
same
cares?
thing, whatever. Yeah, whatever his name is, Gabriel. What is his name?
Dylan.
What did I call him?
Daniel. You have a son named Daniel, and
right. Plus Daniel. It's
until
biblical.
they prove they could play in the NFL, you don't care about their names anyway.
You're 100% right. So they took him in the third round. He was, 100 picks better than Shedeur, right? Or whatever it was. I don't know. And so then my watch is talking to me. Ultimately, I look at all that stuff, and yet you look at where he's at right now, and you think, hey, listen, if he's all the things he was in college, then maybe, just maybe, he could be a guy that takes over. It's really interesting to me, and I had said this, and I've said it on our radio show a bunch, so you can back me up on this. This is not just hindsight being 2020. When I was up at CU doing some coaching in the spring, I really felt like their lack of attention to running the ball and some of their protection schemes I thought were horrendous. And I thought a lot of that was due to the fact that we want Shedeur to be the star. And, my thought process, and I had this conversation with Dion as well, is, I would rather Shedeur go 21 of 26 for 237 yards and 2 TDs, and you win, than being a shootout where he's going, 30 of 42 for 426 yards and 4 TDs, but you end up losing the game. And, my thought process is protection, run the ball, take pressure off your quarterback, and ultimately it's going to be better for him in the long run. And this goes back to just the pre-draft process. Did you get caught up in numbers in hoping that you would elevate Shedeur to a point where like he gets drafted super high? And did it actually, your philosophy actually cost him opportunity in this draft? Like, we'll never know the answer to that, but I was a critic of the way they operated their offense. And you know this from day one, because I thought they didn't put enough attention to some of the things that help a quarterback and take him off the high dive. And, Shedeur, frankly, people talk about him, well, not, taking sacks and his lack of spinning out of the pocket and taking unnecessary sacks and all this stuff. And I would tell you, being up there a little bit, I thought some of the protection stuff was shoddy at best.
Well, we won't make this whole podcast about Shedeur, as captivating as he is. I suspect we'll be talking plenty more about him in podcasts coming up, but there were other stories. The Steelers passing on Shedeur a number of times. Does it just seem inevitable that Aaron Rodgers is a Steeler?
Yeah, I mean, they ended up taking Will Howard, who's a Pennsylvania kid, right, and couldn't get any scholarships to Pitt or to Penn State, ended up, going and playing his career over there at OSU. And so he gets to kind of come back home. And I've heard people like, hey, is Will Howard a sign that Aaron Rodgers? No, he's not a sign that Aaron Rodgers is off the table. As a matter of fact, he's a sign that Aaron Rodgers is very much on the table.
Right.
Because I can't imagine there not having been kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge deal worked out between Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because if there weren't, don't you think the Pittsburgh Steelers would have tried to draft somebody higher, tried to make that move? Ultimately, I feel like Aaron is already signed, sealed, and delivered in Pittsburgh. He's going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. They're not going in to this thing with Mason Rudolph and Will Howard and whoever else it is they have on their roster. So, yeah, I feel like this is inevitable that Aaron Rodgers rolls into Pittsburgh and becomes the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The Giants quarterback situation stink. To the whole bit briefly about Shedeur and the idea that there was some sort of collusion. I don't believe in collusion, but I do know that people talk, and sometimes the well can get poisoned, and all of a sudden it starts to snowball. Clearly, things didn't go well with the Giants. Everything that we're hearing, and there wasn't a team that maybe looked into Shedeur as deeply as the Giants did. So not only did they pass on Shedeur, but they end up trading back up to take Jackson Dart. As you look at the Giants quarterback situation right now, do you see the makings of a plan, or is this a giant mess?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't see anybody on that roster is currently constructed other than Jackson Dart being a potential long-term answer. I mean, Jameis Winston is not a long-term answer. Russell Wilson is not a long-term answer. DeVito is not a long-term answer. So Dart is the guy that you hope comes in there that you can develop and that he can become your starter. And I think, ultimately, I think this is a tale of two quarterbacks, not to belabor the Shador Sanders aspect of it, but also to talk about the Jackson Dart aspect of this. So I sat down with Sean Payton after, it was on the phone, but sat down and had like a 2-hour conversation with him last year after the draft, and just about the draft process, the quarterback situation, and he walked me through kind of what went down. And I think the biggest thing that, that gives credence to kind of the theory that Shador Sanders didn't have generational talent and he flunked out on the interview process. Okay. So when I talked to Sean Payton, Sean told me one of the things they did in reviewing all these quarterbacks was they gave them a truckload of information the night before they were going to meet with them. More information than you could ever process, anybody could process, right? And then they basically graded them on how much they actually knew of the offense, how much time they put in to this, how much they could regurgitate, how much they knew like at the snap of a finger. So he said, hey, man, we loaded them with more information they could ever process. We gave it to them at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We met with them the next morning at 9 a.m. And you could pull an all-nighter and not know all the stuff we gave them, right? And so then they graded each quarterback. They didn't really go through it with Caleb Williams because they knew he was going number 1 overall to Chicago. But with Jaden Daniels, they did it. With Penix, they did it. With Drake May, they did it. With Bo Nix, they did it. With J.J. McCarthy, they did it. And Sean Payton was like, Bo Nix came out of that thing with an A+, knew everything. Like knew it like the back of his hand. Like it was phenomenal, the amount of information he retained and what he knew about our offense. And then he has his backpack with him. I go, open up your backpack, He goes, in his backpack, he had athletic tape, a pair of cleats in case he needed to get a quick workout of Theragun, everything he had in his backpack. It was like the Bo Callahan thing from draft day. Everything he had in his backpack had to do with football stuff. And it sold them like, this is our guy. And that process is incredibly important. Understanding that your quarterback is all about football and that he can regurgitate all those things, that he knows all those things, that he studied, like that he really spent time, right, studying all that stuff. Like that is big time. That information is huge. And Jackson Dart, by all accounts, aced that aspect of the draft process. And Shedeur failed it. And like, that's a red flag. If you're an NFL team and you're like, this quarterback did not spend any time, preparing for our draft meeting, if that is in fact the case coming out of the New York Giants organization, and then Jackson Dart, the guy who's considered the 3rd overall quarterback, aced that process and he's got big time talent, yeah, he jumps over everybody. So I could see that exactly as being what transpired. Like, I don't know, but all the reports you read, it sounds like that's what went down.
So Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston will be the dreaded bridge quarterback for a few weeks before Dart gets his chance?
I would assume so. I don't think the Giants are going to be great, although they have the makings of an outstanding defense, right? And they were pretty good last year. But yeah, if Jackson Dart has that kind of talent and you kind of know what Jameis Winston is and you know what Russell Wilson is, could I see Jackson Dart becoming that guy that takes over after a short time? I could see Jackson Dart coming in there and them going, hey, listen, man, the future is Jackson Dart, and we might as well start the future now. So I could see either Jameis or Russell Wilson getting cut. Couldn't you?
Yeah.
Especially what is Russell making? Like money-wise, I could see them cutting one of those guys and saying, hey, we're not going to go down that road.
While we're still bandying about some of the stuff that went on in the draft, the prank phone calls. Yeah. Shador Sanders got the celebrated one, but Tyler Warren reportedly received some as well. Jeff Ulbrich, the former interim head coach with the Jets after Robert Saleh got fired, now with the Falcons as a defensive coordinator, reportedly left an iPad open that had all the numbers of the prospects and the private phones that they had. His son, 21-year-old son at student at Ole Miss, got a hold of it. They pulled out the prank call and videotaped the whole thing and put it out there. Not a smart move. Should anything happen to Ulbrich? I mean, should the Falcons do anything with this, or what are some of the ramifications, consequences that come out of that?
Yeah, I mean, embarrassing for Jeff Ulbrich. He's a really good coach. He played in the league for a long time. He's a great guy that's very well respected by the guys he coaches. Do I think he should be punished? No, I don't think he should be punished. I think it's unfortunate. I think his kid is an immature 21-year-old knucklehead. And, and I get that. I mean, I understand that, Mike. But should Jeff be punished? No. And, I know Jeff well enough to know I'm sure he is, devastated, upset, incredibly disappointed in his kid. You leave something open on your laptop, you're working in your office or whatever, and your kid walks in and is talking to you, and you leave the room and he's jotting down numbers. I mean, come on, dude. Like, come on. I'll tell you a quick story, which is funny. And I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I won't. This is just my relationship with Mike Shanahan. Sometimes he'll download a bunch of film on his iPad and goes, I want you to take a look at, he's like a mentor to me, right?
Yeah.
And he'll go, I want you to take a look at this film. I want you to take a look at these things, da 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 da. I got a whole load of stuff. And then, I want you to take it home with you, eyeball it, study it, learn it. And then let's get together next week and we'll go over it. I'm like, great. So I got this iPad full of stuff, and I'm watching different concepts and Mike is kind of tutoring me through all this stuff, right? He's like, I'm going to Cabo, take my iPad. I'll come back and we'll kind of go over all this stuff, right? I'll have his iPad. Man, it'll be everybody and their brother's uncle. Like all of a sudden you're watching something and Bill Belichick's texting, and I'm like, I'm sitting there watching going, I could pilfer all your contacts, right?
Yeah.
But like, I know better, right? There was probably a time in my life when I was going, write that down, right? But I just, I skip it like it's my grandson when he's got one of my wife's cell phone and a number comes up and goes, he just like all of a sudden my daughter's calling me, guys, he'll just exit out like, nope, ignore, right? He's too busy watching a video. So anyhow, just funny, but yeah.
Well, here's what I gotta know. When some of these famous people would have reached out to Shanahan, was there ever any part of you that just wanted to have a little fun and be Mike Shanahan? Hey, Bill, Mike.
No.
How you doing?
I would like.
What do you need to know?
Right. The respect I have for Mike, obviously, and the relationship I have with Mike, I would never ever.
And let's be honest. Yes, it's a healthy dose of respect, but mainly it's still
fear. Yeah. I could not bear for him to sit down, coming back from Cabo, because he's always tan.
Yes.
But when he comes back from Cabo, he's the color of your sweater. So, and to have the fire marshal just looking at you like, I'm so disappointed.
So disappointed in you.
So disappointed in you. Like, that would be way too much for me to handle. Way too much.
You got a good Cowboy reaction? Everyone's always curious about the Cowboys. I don't know why, but apparently they moved the needle. But okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at what the Cowboys did.
Yeah. Well, first off, they get Tyler Booker. Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. Now, the funny thing about after the pick, Jerry Jones comes out and says, maybe we'll establish our own tush push. So let me say, you drafted a kid because of his ability to maybe line up at guard and establish a tush push with the quarterback who's been injured in a play that will probably get disallowed by the NFL. Hey, wise thinking. Although he is a road grader, the kid is big and he's physical, and I love tip of the spear, like Jim Harbaugh said. I love it when you draft offensive linemen. But here's the crazy thing. All right, think about this, Mike. The Dallas Cowboys are cornering the market on fat guys named Tyler. Okay, in 2022, they drafted in the first round Tyler Smith. Last year, all-pro guard, I think it was 2022, all-pro guard that they drafted in 2022, Tyler Smith. In 2024, they drafted left tackle Tyler Guyton in the first round. This year, 2025, they draft Tyler Booker, first round. So if you're fat and you play O-line and your name is Tyler, welcome to the Cowboys in 2026. You're going number one, baby. You are going number one.
As much as grief as you love giving the Cowboys, and I know you enjoy it, they have been pretty good when it comes to identifying offensive linemen, no?
They've drafted, just the draft alone, they've drafted more Pro Bowl players in the last however many years than any organization in football. The draft is not their problem.
It's free agency.
It's free agency, and it's an owner that, they have been really good in the draft. It's just everything else just seems to fall apart, but draft is not a problem for them.
All right, last thing, and because you got a lot of NFL fans out there watching right now who root for their respective teams, and they're hearing a lot of feedback about what their teams did or did not do well in the draft, right down to the dreaded grades. Oh, they got a B+. Oh, they got a C-. We here in Denver heard from a lot of Bronco fans who felt just kind of like the draft was meh, and they're basing it on, what the experts, the so-called experts out there are saying. What would be your message to NFL fans whose teams are not getting good reviews for their draft?
Grading the draft a day or 2 days or a week after the draft is one of the most insanely stupid exercises that we go through. You have no idea what kind of player your team drafted. They drafted a college player that may or may not be a really good college player, but when they get to the next level, the NFL, you don't know how they're going to react to this game. This game is different. Some guys excel, some guys don't. Some guys are drafted into systems that fit their personality, that fit their skill set. Some guys aren't. And so, I always say, if you draft a kid that has got a skill set of A, B, and C, and you put him in a system that requires him to be X, Y, and Z, and he fails, is it his fault or is it your fault? Mm-hmm. That's the part of the draft process that people don't really understand, is that fit is probably just as important as the skill level of the player. If you're asking a guy to do a bunch of things he can't do, I always say you're the dumbass that put him in that position. Right. And so this is a process. We probably won't truly know the effect of this draft for several years. But also I keep going back to the Denver Broncos because of my relationship with Sean Payton. When everybody said, hey, Bo Nix is the sixth best quarterback in this draft class, probably should be a second rounder, but he saw value. He saw brilliance. He saw a kid that doesn't take sacks. He saw an athlete. I heard all these. He's not that athletic. You watch him play, he's freaking unbelievably athletic. Oh, he doesn't have great arm talent. You watch him play, oh my God, he can really rip it. All these draft evaluators, they're not all right. And so there's a lot of things that we are going to it's going to remain to be seen. And I will tell you, Mike, I have had over the course of my career playing, I've had first rounders that came out on the field and in the very first day of minicamp, and I'm like, oh my God, we spent a first round draft on that kid. That kid couldn't play dead in a Western. He's awful. And then I've also seen guys that are 6th or 7th rounders go how did that guy slip to the 6th or 7th round? Right. And then I've seen first rounders come in. You're like, oh shoot, we got us one. Mm-hmm. That kid can play. So you just never know how a kid's going to react until he's in that environment. And ultimately it'll take you 2 or 3 years for you to truly grade this year's draft.
All right. Well, we'll still have a lot more to sift through with this draft as we move along. But, we won't have very long until the schedule gets announced. But, a lot of good draft leftovers to get into this week. Should be fun.
Yeah, by the way, Clay Matthews on his draft in Green Bay with the letter from the president, that was epic, by the way. That was where he read and he said, this is a letter from the president. And then he opened it up and goes, you know what? Chicago Bears, you still suck. That might have been my favorite part of
that there's still good, sports hate out there. We don't want that to ever go away.
No, you know that I still have so much hate for the Oakland Raiders, Oakland, the Vegas Raiders now,
Right.
but the Raiders and the Cowboys still.
Yeah, I don't.
Good old fashioned just hatred.
Yeah,
It's
just
awesome.
Jab it in there whenever you can.
The Clay Matthews, man, I love it. I love it. So anyhow, oh, by the way, I got a new bracelet my granddaughter made me when she came and visited.
I saw that earlier today. I was going to ask you about that. What is it? Does it say
my grandkids call me Popo.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can read that, but it
is.
says Popo there.
Yeah.
And then she did it backwards, but here it says, she goes, and it says #man. So little Drew, thank you, Drew. For everybody involved in the Stinkin Truth podcast, for Mike, I am Mark. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Oh, by the way, my top fan accounts it's not OnlyFans, Mike. You're not going to see my Yoo-hoo, but my top fans account. If you want us to break down any of the people picked up in your draft, your team's draft, just send us a message on there, and we'll start digging through that. We got a bunch of film being released on Top Fans. Also working with a coach in the NFL. 30 plus years of coaching, 4 Super Bowl championships under his belt. So he's doing a lot of the breakdowns as well. Sure. So check it out. That's Top Fans / Mark Schlereth, or search Mark Schlereth. All right. For Mike, I am Mark. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. We'll be back with you guys later on in the week.